gaps to publishing research papers and understanding intellectual property rights. We hope that by the end of this FDP, participants will not only have gained a deeper understanding of research process, but also have the confidence to apply the skills and techniques learned in their own research endeavors. Thank you for being part of this exciting journey, and we hope that you find the FDP informative, engaging, and rewarding. Dear esteemed guests and participants and speakers, it is my pleasure to extend a heartfelt invitation to our esteemed Dean, Professor Dr. Vanna Sehgal, who is the Dean and Principal Faculty of Architecture and Planning, AKTU, and a patron and mentor of the FDP. Dr. Vanna Sehgal is an architect, artist, and academic with over 25 years of experience in the field of architecture. She holds a Bachelor of Architecture from CCA Chandigarh, a Master of Architecture from IIT Roorkee, and a PhD in Architecture from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. As an academic, her area of research is architecture theory, and her thesis was entitled Infinite in Architecture. She regularly writes in journals on both theoretical and practical design issues. As an architect, she has worked on diverse range of projects including hotels, archive galleries, memorials, houses, interiors, and redevelopment proposals. Her unwavering support and guidance have been instrumental in making this faculty development program a reality, and we are incredibly grateful for her contributions. We would be honored if she could grace us with her presence and share her insights and wisdom with us during the opening ceremony. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our beloved Dean and Principal. Ma'am, we request you to please address the gathering. Ma'am, you're not audible.
Good morning, everybody. So I believe we have got quite a galaxy of architects and planners today who have, who are part of this FDP in a maybe a capacity of a trainer and maybe in a capacity of maybe absorbing what architecture research is all about. And I think. In today's world, as you know, when I joined architecture, it was research was unheard of, because as an architect, I think we research on every project. It's nothing new to us because we kind of delve into the pros and cons, and it's mostly practical, it's mostly observational, but we do that all the time. So when I joined the profession, it was mostly we used to work on proposals for conservation projects for intac and for a lot of other maybe report writing and everything, but our research was just limited to that. They were mostly observational, mostly photographic analysis, mostly sketchy or sketch oriented observations as architects. So but over these 27 years of my teaching in architecture and dabbling a little bit in practice, I have realized that research has become a very, very dominant and important part of architectural profession. Where does this, when did this change or what happened? So it might have happened because the architecture education was at many places combined with the engineering practice of teaching, where PhD is kind of compulsory for maybe stepping into academic field, and rightly so. So when they were compared that why aren't architects doing in my time, even masters was not needed, and not many, I mean, I was one of the only ones in my college, in my class, who did masters after my bachelor's. So there so again, this kind of a change happened gradually. Many people started doing masters because we came into a world of specialization. We came into a world where a general architecture practice would need maybe a landscapist, maybe a site management person, maybe a conservation person, maybe a urban designer. So all these kind of masters started becoming popular, and a lot of uh, many architects started doing masters. But then another 10 years rolled by, and then in academics, PhD became kind of not compulsory, but kind of people started thinking about it, that we should also, being in academics, we should be able to finish a doctorate. And it kind of, I think, I don't know whether it's so, it has pros and cons. Uh, so many people say that is doctorate necessary for being a good teacher, so these questions always come to us all the time. And I feel maybe it is not compulsory to be a doctorate to be a good teacher, but a doctorate definitely makes you a more confident, a more it gives you a kind of it opens up your mind to gamut of researches, gamut of ideas that are floating in the world, and it makes you little more aware of what is going on around you. As you know, my father always tells me that after completing your PhD, it is no major feeling. You always feel that uh, you are just at this at the shore of the sea of knowledge, and you're just picking up the pebbles, and the one odd wave sometimes touches you, and you are not you then realize the vastness of the knowledge that surrounds us, and it actually humbles you a lot. I think after becoming a taking a doctorate, being a doctorate, after doing your PhD, you don't feel that you know too much. In fact, you think you know very less. So having said that, today, so these kind of quality development programs or faculty development programs are very important, because I think they orient you towards what is architectural research all about. And uh, as I said, it has a designer's perspective always. And I always compare, we are part of an engineering university, and so there are a lot of RDCs, or research development committees, that are happening all the time when our RDC happens. And so the engineering dean always tells me that we finish in 4 hours, our 60 students, and you're sitting on those 20 students for 2 days. So because I think architects have the capacity, to maybe think of every process, every and architecture is, even if we do a very quantifiable or very tangible kind of a research, there is always it is solution oriented. So solution oriented PhDs always have this uh, this kind of a pros and cons. There are a lot of directions that one can go in. That is why one has to be thoughtful at every aspect, and go about it in a way, because a normal architect says that he also researches all the time. So what is your contribution which is beyond that normal project research? So we are always surrounded by these questions. And besides the reading and writing, that and maybe experimenting in other researches, ours is more observational also. So the research methodology, the research design keeps on changing as you go by. So it's we always say this is the functional topic that you are bothered about. It's a functional thing. It keeps on changing. The dynamic, it is so dynamic. The architectural research is highly dynamic, so one shouldn't get really bothered that the research is not going the way you had thought on the first pretext, because it changes and sometimes it does a U-turn also. So what I'm trying to say is that it's highly dynamic, more dynamic than any other PhD in any other subject. So, as you all know, there are topics like groundwater recharge in traditional communities, or role of PPP in lower income housing groups, or carbon footprint in developing countries. These are the few researches that I have guided. So they are all the time, they are more tangible because there is data, there is statistics that you can use to analyze that data and come to a or it's easier way to prove some kind of hypothesis that you have made, which is always, these kind of researches are in allied fields and planning fields, which have relatively more data, relatively more, the result is more tangible. You can see that you are going in some direction, and there is a tangible output because of that statistical methodology that you have applied. But then there are many researches that are purely qualitative, and sometimes combined with some quantitative data. So that is the real challenge where the architectural research is at this moment. So I feel that where quantitative research has their objective measurements and their statistical, mathematical, numerical analysis is always there of the data that is collected through surveys, through the pre-existing statistical this thing, and you use some kind of computational technique to come up with something tangible. But where qualitative research stands is that you are not addressing the question how many, you are addressing the question how. So the moment how is there, so then there are these 15 kind of ways which are shown to you, and you have to prove which is your way. You have to prove it at every aspect, and you can do it through a lot of qualitative research methodologies, which are now very, very prevalent. We have adopted it from sociology, we have adopted it from art side, we have adopted it from design areas. So which are basically ethnography, then phenomenology, then grounded theory. There are a lot of these researches which you might go through when during the FDP. So all these kind of phenomenological researches have a very, very strong base in theoretical theory. So I feel that uh, the difference lies that how you present this data, how you present the outcomes, is through maybe you can not only through graphs, one can present it in a very, very graphical way, which we are very used to, which understand very well. And sometimes presenting it maybe graphically gets the gray shades also in, which is not graphically, I meant in a very spatial format, which is very different from a maybe a per chart, or a bar graph, or something like that, or a pie chart. So if you present it more in a spatial format, it becomes easier. So there are various readings and various writings on this also, that how do you go about combining your quantitative research with the qualitative to make it into a more into a more kind of a solution oriented research that architecture and planning seeks. And so we are lucky, we are in an age where we can use technology. I mean, technology like for doing environmental research, we have data loggers, weather stations, simulations, and then for maybe more intangible kind of futuristic projections, we have virtual reality. Then we have, for planning, we have GIS modules, to analyze, which would have taken years to do the basic documentation. Now we have help of all this technology to prove our points. So we should be adept at using this technology. I think that is foremost in our uh, in the architecture and planning research. So the idea is to go into it with lot of what was it skills. The skills are about using these technologies in the best way possible, using softwares in the best way possible, using the accessing the data in the best way possible, so using making even bibliography in the best software possible. So that is also very, very important part of the research when you go into it. Having said that, I think it will be 1 week of learning how to research, theorize, and maybe put it into practice and put it into a solution oriented analysis. And I hope that this quality improvement program or faculty development program will be helpful to you and inspire you, because I think always it happens that PhD always is at the back foot of all the activities that you are doing in life. It takes a back foot. Please put it on the front foot, and because the more time you take on it, it gets little. PhD is also a very jealous mistress. Because I feel that you should be at it every day. That is important. If you're not there on it, you lose track, and then re-picking the threads becomes sometimes difficult, and it kind of and write along the while you are doing it. Please write a lot, because starting again, at the end of doing everything, then you start doing your first chapter, it becomes like a mammoth task. So keep writing along. These things which I've learned from just guiding many of them, and understanding the fears, understanding the mental blocks which students go through, scholars go through. So just my this thing to it is that you have to keep it on the front foot and keep going at it. It is not rocket science. It is just a methodology. Go through it, and go through it consistently. I'm sure everything will be like a cakewalk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspiring and insightful speech. Your valuable inputs have enlightened us all and given us a deeper understanding of the importance of research capabilities in architecture and planning. We're incredibly grateful for your presence and contribution to this faculty development program. Your support has been instrumental in making this event a success, and we couldn't have done it without you. Once again, we express our deepest gratitude to you for your gracious presence and your valuable time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed coordinator for the Faculty Development Program, Dr. Shubhrajit Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Utkal University, a Master of City Planning from IIT Kharagpur, and a PhD in Urban Planning also from IIT Kharagpur. With over 17 years of experience in the field of urban planning, he has worked with prestigious organizations such as Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority and the Department for International Development. We are honored to have Dr. Banerjee as a coordinator for this faculty development program, and we look forward to hearing his insights and knowledge on the topic at hand. So we invite you to take the floor and elaborate further on the topic of this FDP and elaborate the program outline.
Thank you, Zuberia. Good morning to one and all the esteemed speakers, our honorable the principal madam, dear participants. I have got this opportunity to actually coordinate this faculty development program, and I think really it should be an added value to all of you who have come with a lot of expectations to gather knowledge and maybe certain and clear certain doubts regarding your research process. Right from day one in my teaching career, I have been teaching research methodology. So research methodology which I teach, I have not only taught for architecture and planning students, I have taught for I was very fortunate enough that I have taught for even students of departments like mechatronics, nanotechnology, I mean, hardcore engineering students also. So what I found there is just what Vandana madam was saying a few minutes back. What I found there is that architectural researchers and engineers who do research, they have a lot of difference in the mindset. And that mindset is probably because architectural research involves a lot of qualitative issues, which probably the engineering experimental research does not. So in order to, but I've got the best of the best speakers what I could, with my own network. I could, like, what is the difference where architecture students face along with most of the institutions? You people are there, and along with you, you will see that one of your friends who is doing a PhD in engineering is finishing it off in 3 years with the flick of a finger. What is it? So specifically, and why with all your efforts, with twice or 4 times your effort, you are taking more than 5 years. So the crux of the situation is that you have to understand that what you are going to do and how you are going to do. So that involves the entire methodology. So today I am lucky enough that I could, apart from our in-house professors and associate professors, which we have, who are really experts in this field, I could get Professor Harimohan Pillai, who has been working for over 3 decades in architectural research. And I have specifically requested him that, sir, please start the session, because you will be starting the session telling the students how to start writing and how to start thinking. So how to start the research in architectural mode. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invite, and I really hope that the students will be encouraged, and they will be really this thing with all your knowledge base and the way you this thing. And then we have 2 more experts from NIT Patna, Professor B.K. Das and Professor Shailendra Mandal, who are very contemporary to us. And they have been working in engineering institutions and facing the issue of architecture and engineers. One scholar of them takes 5 years, whereas one scholar of his friend takes 3 years. So where is that disparity? Okay, so these type of things were in my mind, and as I taught the students of architecture, planning, and engineering, I could get this more clear that there has to be a systematic research methodology, understanding of the students, so that they can complete their PhD well in time, and also with good outcomes. So that is what is more important. So but before I conclude and hand over the platform, I would like to say that we have scheduled the program in a 5-day, as a 5-day FDP. The first day, as we have already seen, the first session was with Madam, and then I am there here. And after just this, we'll be having a short break of the tea break, and then we'll have Professor Harimohan Pillai from 10:30 to 12, and he will illustrate on how to write, illustrate, and justify research. Post lunch, we have the 3rd session from 2:30 to 4 p.m. and that is by Professor Joydeep Datta. He is an adjunct professor in our institute. We have been very lucky to have him here, and sir will be speaking about how to find the research gap, which is very important, which mostly researchers probably after 1.5 years of this thing, they still struggle to find the research gap. Because once the research gap is there, the researcher finds out the research gap, the rest is how you solve it. That's it. So sir will be speaking on that. Tomorrow, the first session starts with Dr. Indrani Chakraborty. She also has a lot of experience in research, and she will be giving you the elaborate description of research design. How do you formulate your research design? What are the components step by step, and how it goes on? So when we work, we need a systematic procedure to work. So this research design is the systematic procedure of your research. So she will be elaborating on that from 10 a.m. to 11:30. and followed by a short tea break. And then we have the 5th session by Dr. Ritu Gulati on systematic literature review. And post lunch from 2:30 to 4, we have a session by Dr. Meeta Tandon, Associate Professor of our institute, and she will be speaking on qualitative methods for research in architecture. On day 3, we start the session at 10 a.m. by sampling design, again by Professor Joydeep Datta, followed by a small tea break. And from 12 to 1:30, we have Dr. Shailendra Mandal from NIT Patna, as I have already mentioned. He will be speaking on quantitative research methods. So after that, from 2:30 to 4 p.m., we have another session by another expert, Professor Dr. B.K. Das from NIT Patna. He will be speaking on statistical tools of research. On day 4, we start at 10 a.m. with a session by Dr. Arindam Biswas from IIT Roorkee. He will be speaking on factor analysis, linear regression, applications, and validation of hypothesis. From the 11th session is from 12 to 1:30 by Dr. Anuj Sharma from Center for Advanced Studies, AKTU Lucknow. He will be speaking on how to publish research paper writing and publication, which is very important component of the entire PhD process. I know PhD scholars, they finish off writing their thesis, but still await research publications, and for that their entire submission gets delayed. So that's there. And then in the 12th session from 2:30 p.m. To 4 p.m., we have Dr. Neha Bansal, who will be speaking on referencing methods. Nowadays, you have softwares, but in our times, I still remember when I first entered research, and Professor Joydeep Datta was my teacher at IIT Kharagpur. He said me, Shubro, whatever you do one thing, you take a diary, and from day 1, you start writing whatever you have read, because referencing used to take a lot of time. But referencing is equally important, because your entire report will speak for your entire work to your externals. You are not there to make them understand. So how you have found out the gap, how you have gone with your research, everything goes for referencing and indexing, of course. So on day 5th, the first session is again by Dr. Neha Bansal on indexing. And then from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. You will be having a session with me on report writing techniques and research ethics. We need to follow certain ethics as a researcher, and we need to know certain techniques to represent our report and work in the form of a report. So I'll be taking that session for you from 12 to 1:30, and thereafter, the last session, we have Dr. Shubhranshu Goswami from CEPT Ahmedabad. He specialized in hand-holding, patenting and licensing, and this type of procedures, which are also a very integral component of your research. And with him, he will be having lawyers with regards to what are the legal components of patenting, licensing, and so on. So we are really thankful to him that he will be getting that. I think Professor Dr. Goswami could not join us today because of his busy schedule, but he will be definitely there to take your session on the day 5. So, and then we will be concluding with a vote of thanks by our HOD, Dr. Ritu Gulati. And but this is with very big sorrow that I would like to say, not sorrow, I'm not very happy to say that we have to take a test at the end, so which is an MCQ type of tests for the participants, and your attendance and tests and everything. Finally, we will be providing you with an e-certificate, and I'm sure all of you will come out with good results in the test. So this is all regarding the entire FDP, what you will be having in your coming 5 days. I hope that all of you will really gather a knowledge base from here, and you will be at the end, you will at least be satisfied with really with the thing that you have attended a good FDP. That is all what we want from you. So we'll be having a feedback form. So in the feedback form, please feel free to give us a non-biased opinion, so that we can again be in touch with you. So, and I really thank all the participants who have enrolled for this FDP. I can see that it's from everywhere in the country, down south to the west, to east, to north, to everywhere. So I really wish that with the hopes with which you have come here today and joined the FDP, we will be able to give you the response accordingly. Thank you so much, and I would like to hand over the platform to Zuberia, our co-coordinator. Thank you, Zuberia.
Thank you so much, sir, for the warm and gracious introduction of all the speakers and the welcome address to the participants. Your insightful words have set the tone for an enriching and stimulating FDP. We appreciate your efforts and contribution in making this event huge. Before we proceed with the 5-day faculty online development program, we would just like to provide the participants with a few more instructions. Firstly, each day's session shall be carried out with the same Google Meet link. In case you have any issues in joining the link, please feel free to contact Panima, our student coordinator. Secondly, we'd like to request you to join the meeting with the name you have registered for this program. Kindly avoid logging in to the meeting with any other name apart from your original name. Thirdly, we'd recommend that you log in the session 15 minutes prior to the time to ensure a better experience throughout the event. Fourthly, kindly keep your microphone on mute and video camera off while the expert sessions are in progress. In case you have any queries or questions while a session is going on, you can type them in the chat box, or you can ask them in the Q&A during Q&A session at the end of the session. Finally, we'd like to inform you that the e-certificates, as already told you by Dr. Banerjee, that will be provided to those participants of the program who fulfill 100% attendance as well as score more than 60% of the MCQ test. The test is scheduled on 24th February from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. and the attendance shall be counted individually for all sessions during a single day. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to introduce the team behind the successful organization and management of this FDP. I have already introduced you with Dr. Banerjee, who is the FDP coordinator and has played a pivotal role in conceptualizing and planning this entire event. I would also like to acknowledge the hard work that will be put in by our rapporteurs, who will diligently take notes and keep a recording of the proceedings of the FDP. We will have Architect Mahima Thusso as rapporteur for day 1 and 2, Architect Divya Pandey for day 3 and 4, and Planner Arundhati Mishra for day 5. Lastly, I would like to appreciate the efforts of our student coordinator, Architect Tanima, who will be managing the online aspects of the FDP seamlessly. Thank you to the entire team for the contributions in making this FDP a success. Thank you all for your attention, and we hope you have a great learning experience.
Yes, thank you, Zuberia. It would have been a really unjustified thing if there wasn't a formal thank you to our co-coordinator Zuberia, and she has really well organized the things, and the rapporteurs, and my special thanks to Vandana madam. Madam, we are really very thankful to you that you have given us this opportunity to host this FDP, and our student coordinators and rapporteurs, a very big thanks to all of you. And it's really, they have done a lot of work, and Zuberia in special. Thank you. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for this engaging introductory session of the FDP. Before we end the introductory session, I would like to hand over the program and responsibilities to Architect Mahima Thusso. She will be proceeding the first session of the FDP and concluding the day with her closing remarks and providing you information on how to access today's sessions. Over to you, Mahima ma'am.
Thank you so much, Joveria. Good morning to all the participants. I am pleased to introduce our first speaker of the day and the FDP, Dr. Harimohan Pillai. Dr. Pillai, an esteemed architect and an academician, who will be our speaker for the first session of this FDP. With a BSc in Chemistry from University of Kerala and a PhD in Architecture from IIT Kharagpur, he has had a distinguished career spanning over 4 decades. He began his professional journey with MS Chandravarkar and Thakur, Bangalore in 1979 and later worked with the United States Foreign Buildings Office at New Delhi as assistant project supervisor. In 1984, he started his own architectural practice in Mumbai and also joined as a faculty member in Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai. As an academic head of the department, he developed 2 schools of architecture in Mumbai as well as in Kerala. Currently, Dr. Pillai is practicing in Thrissur, Kerala, and has been invited as a guest faculty for architectural design and allied subjects in several schools of architecture across India and Texas Tech University in USA. He is also a member of Senate at the School of Architecture and Planning, Vijayawada, and a recognized mentor for Traditional Indian Architecture Knowledge System by AICTE for IKS, which is the Indian Knowledge Systems initiative of Government of India. Dr. Harimohan Pillai's academic interest revolves around teaching architectural graphics as a system of representation of architecture, conducting design workshops in schools of architecture, and documenting traditional architecture of India. We are fortunate and privileged enough to have him as our first speaker for the FTP, where he will be sharing with us his immense knowledge and insight on the topic of architecture research methodology, how to write it, illustrate, and justify it. A very good morning to you, sir, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Madam Mahima, for that brief introduction.
Most welcome, sir.
Let me confess, it's a great pleasure to be here on this platform, and I can see there are 113 participants. And it's good to be on this platform, virtual platform, in the comfort of your home. Only thing is we cannot share cups of teas. We have to make our own cup of tea. So before I log in, let me just access the presentation that I would like to make today, and please let me know if it is visible. Why I am not able to share? Just there is a delay, actually, lag.
I think we should all put our videos off, then it might become easier.
Okay, finally, thank you so much. I'm sorry for the delay. Okay, so without wasting much time, let me just talk about, I hope I am audible, clear to all of you. And
yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, see, being an architect, when the idea struck me that I should also do PhD just for, because I am in academics. As a practicing architect, I knew that I don't need to do a PhD because, as Madam earlier mentioned, Principal Ma'am, that we are doing anyway a lot of research when we do a project. Honestly, if you're trying to do an honest project, you definitely end up doing a lot of research in order to make the project work in the real world. So, but in academics, there is a tendency to grow in life by looking at everything from the academic perspective. So that's where the importance of research comes. As a formal degree, frankly speaking, I have not done masters. After Bachelor of Architecture degree and several years of practice, I directly went into doing a PhD work. So what I understood while doing PhD is what is the experience that I'm sharing with you about, as an architect, how it is possible not to write the PhD, but also illustrate. Through illustration, how to justify the research work that you do. So this aspect especially becomes important in explaining your research methodology. So I'm going to speak about how to write, illustrate, and justify an architectural research methodology using my own experience of having done, say, the PhD. Next slide, please. All of you who are at the, let us say, the beginning of research work should know these things. I'm assuming that I'm talking to the beginners who are trying to do a research in architecture. See, research methodology is simply speaking, is a way of explaining how you intend to carry out your research and the entire methods that you will apply to not only explain what you are trying to do, but also make the reader or the person who is going to assess your work understand what kind of methods you have applied to conduct your research. Next image, please. So, very simply speaking, when you prepare your methodology, it should attempt to do the following. Like, you have to ensure that you are doing a reliable work, validate the results, express your aims and objectives in a very clear terms. And you should also be able to encompass whatever data you are going to collect, from where you are going to collect the data. All these aspects should be very well explained in your research methodology. I suppose I cannot proceed, right, without you helping me in this process. The next slide, please.
Yes, sir.
So, when you do research, whether architectural or otherwise, you need to understand that you are working, you are doing your work in a large domain, or which also is called a universe, the universe of knowledge, or a large domain of knowledge system. So in this knowledge system, there can be different contexts. And as an architect, when you do research in architecture, you should be able to identify what is the context in which you are going to do research. Broadly speaking, the context of the universe or the domain of research that you are doing can be divided into 5 different types or typologies. The first two, ontological, epistemological, may sound too complex to you or high funda, but I'll try to explain that in a very simple manner. But we understand what is meant by political context, social context, or cultural context. All these 3 contexts are extremely simple for us as architects to understand, because we know that whatever projects we do it definitely in a social context, social and cultural context. But many a times, most of these projects evolve if you understand the political context also in which you are executing the project. Next image, please. So let me try to briefly explain to you what is ontological and so on. You see, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy. Ontology and metaphysics are related, which looks at the very nature of things, why we exist, what is the cause of our existence, what is our identity in this universe, and so on. So in architecture, what is the role of metaphysics? How metaphysics or the subject of ontology comes in architecture? I can give you a very simple example, which I discovered in the process of doing a PhD in traditional architectural system of our country, that all over our country, people who indulge in traditional architectural practice or work with traditional designers, they assign a relationship between the birth of a person, the birth nakshatra of a person, and the relationship of that nakshatra with the built form. I don't know if you have heard of this, but this is the case in traditional societies in all parts of our country. So this is one example. How do we relate the birth of a person, the time of birth of a person, and the kind of build forms he or she lives in? Very interesting topic to research about. Next, please. And another very interesting idea which I found, which finds mention in almost all traditional societies in our country, is the idea of muhurtam, or auspicious time to start something, auspicious time to do foundation, auspicious time to put the door frame in place. I don't know if you have come across this, but this is all part of the practice of architecture, especially of residential build forms, temples, and all kinds of other build forms which we have in our country. Next, please. Epistemological is little more philosophical in nature because it investigates into the origin, nature, and methods and limits of human knowledge. In architecture, you see the whole idea of doing a PhD in Vastu Shastra, if you mention, it will be looked at with raised eyebrows in many universities. I also had this problem because when I tried to do PhD in architecture, I wanted to call it Vastu Shastra or Vastu Vidya, not architecture. Because Vastu Shastra or Vastu Vidya or Sthapatya Kala has its presence in our country. So why do we keep talking about architecture? And we should talk more about the way we in our cultural system refer to even the science of built form as Vastu Shastra or Vastu Vidya and so on. So there is a deep philosophy attached to development, design and construction of built forms in our cultural context in our country. So next, please. Political, social, cultural is known to all of us, and most of the projects that we do are either in one of these domains or all of these domains. And we do projects in the context of prevailing technologies. We adopt the construction technologies and different technologies which are available today before we actually design or even execute a project. Next, please. Once you have this context identified in which you are going to do your research work, the time comes when you have to look at the problem that you are trying to address within this context of political, social, and cultural, dominantly political, social, and cultural domain of our environment. So here, when you state a problem or you raise questions or create a hypothesis, you are with what intention you are going to solve this problem, who's the audience you are going to address. These things become important when you try to identify a problem within the large domain of architectural research. I will give examples of this as we go ahead. Next, please. Let me first explain this illustration, which is trying to put together in a nutshell the entire process of doing a PhD. So once you identify the problem, that this is the problem which I am trying to solve as architectural research, you need to look at whatever theory has been proposed related to that problem in the past by experts in your domain. Now, let me give you a simple example. If you are doing something on Vastu Shastra or Vastu Vidya, you have to really look at all the theoretical studies done, books written by traditional architects in our country, which is rarely addressed in our educational field. So we call it literature review. We develop conceptual models, ideas, etc. When we look at the theory available in journals and books and literature while doing the research work. Next, please. So once we have done the theoretical study related to the problem that you have identified to solve, you have to develop the methodology. Only after we do these two parts, understand the theories behind the problem that you have trying to solve, that you develop a methodology to conduct your research work. And in methodology comes the data collection, data analysis, deciding what would be the sample size of the data that you will be analyzing, understanding the tools which are required, such as interviews, questionnaires, surveys, observations, experiments, etc., which should all become part of the methodology that you are trying to develop to solve the problem that you have stated. Also using all the theories, background theories, which are available from your literature review, etc. So it is at this stage that as an architect, you must, I believe that you must, and which I had tried, to illustrate the entire procedure in the form of illustrations, sketches. We do, of course, do drawings, but sketches, illustrations, etc. Because architecture, broadly speaking, is an experiential subject. There is no architecture which can be explained just through drawings or views, etc. It is an experiential domain. If you want to understand a building, you can understand it only perhaps half of, even less than half of what it is trying to convey through drawings or sketches or pictures and photographs. You need to enter a building to understand a building. Now, that is a big task. So what if you are designing something how do you explain what will be the experiences will be like within that built form, say to your client or to somebody to whom you want to express what you are trying to do through a particular kind of architectural design process. So being illustrative is one way of looking at the architectural research methodology. Next, please. So what is the importance of such a research methodology? All research methodologies try to look at giving a kind of legitimacy to the research that you are doing, and also try to scientifically prove what you are trying to, the problem that you are trying to understand and find solutions to. So the legitimacy aspect can have two parts. One is the practical legitimacy of the problem that you are trying to solve, the solution that you are getting, or the political legitimacy. We are going into more detail, but ultimately, whether it is political or practical, you have to prove whatever methodology that you have developed in a scientific context. Next, please. Now, this is fairly well understood by all researchers. This diagram, this very simple illustrative diagram, which explains what is research, what is the scientific method of research. You observe, you question, you create a hypothesis, you conduct experiment, arrive at conclusions through analysis, and put forth the result. This is a normal method, scientific method. But when you apply this method in architectural context, is it possible to be illustrative? That is the question here. Is it possible to create a research methodology which is more illustrative and less text-oriented? Next, please. So research methodology in simple terms is what is stretched out as various chapters between introduction and conclusion. Say when you have a PhD work finally prepared and submitted, you start with an introduction and then you have a conclusion. In the introduction, you state your problem, you talk about how you are going to solve the problem, etc. And in the conclusion, you would say that this is the way the problem was addressed and this is the solution. And these are the possible fields of research which arise out of your contribution as a solution to the problem. So whatever you do between the introduction and conclusion is the research methodology. If you can make it an illustrative, of course, we do make use of a lot of charts to explain, but as an architect, you can try different methods of being illustrative in the research work. Next, please. So I would like to showcase to you how I understood this aspect of being illustrative in research methodology through my PhD work, which I did in IIT Kharagpur under the guidance of Professor Uttam Kumar Banerjee. And you see, one of the very important part of starting a research is the title itself. Your title should be very crisp and clear about what you are trying to do. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? So the title of a PhD becomes extremely important. And please look at the title, which I arrived at after a lot of thought processes. How to put up a title which explains what you're really trying to do. So the title of my research work, which I made it very illustrative in the end, is Identifying and Establishing Linkages in Architecture from Traditional to Modern. Now, it's a very simple title, but what am I trying to explain here? It is based on what did not happen in our country. You see, how did we become a modern country? How did modernism enter into our country? If you look at, we all associate the entry of modernism in architecture in our country with the development of the city of Chandigarh. I hope there are no two arguments about this. Everyone knows that we believe that when Corbusier came to India and developed the city of Chandigarh, and when many architects worked with him in the development of city of Chandigarh, modernism or modern architecture was born. Thereafter, whatever happened by way of inspiration, by looking at Corbusier's work in Chandigarh, in all cities of India was called, or is even today called, modern architecture. Now, I was trying to assume that what if Chandigarh had not happened? What if Corbusier had not come? What if we had no exposure to what is happening in the Western world? Did our country had any opportunity of becoming modern on its own terms? Was that a possibility? This was a question which I asked, that if there was no modernism in our country, inspired from Corbusier's work in our country, how would he have become modern? Or how would modern architecture have developed in our country? So this thought led me to identify the problem, which I tried to solve. And I called it identifying and establishing the linkages in architecture. When I say architecture, the architecture of India. What are the linkages we sort of missed from making traditional buildings in a modern way in our country? So this is a thesis topic. Please go ahead. So in order to do this, trying to identify linkages from traditional to modern, when I did a study of architecture, traditional architecture of which is there even today existing all over India, I found that each region has got its own unique ways of design and construction. Rajasthan is very different from Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is very different from Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh is very different from Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or Kerala and so on. So since I belong to Kerala, I thought that I will focus my attention to Kerala's traditional architecture and try and visualize how would have Kerala's traditional architecture slowly become modern architecture if there has been no intervention of, let us say, influence of Corbusier even in Kerala. In Kerala also, modern architecture is all that is influenced by Corbusier's development of Chandigarh, which you can very clearly see if you travel from north to south of Kerala. Whereas even today, Kerala is a place where traditional residential built forms have survived for centuries. Several 100-year-old houses still exist. Still they work, people own these houses. They get passed on from one generation to another. So I found by studying Kerala's traditions and the way modernization quietly came into Kerala's built environment, I found that what modernism did was to replace, not adapt. It was not adaptation of design systems which existed for several centuries in Kerala, but it was just replacement. You just replace everything that is existing. But at the same time, some architects who thought that this is not good for the built environment of Kerala, they did revival. And in most cases, revival of traditional system was in the form of imitation. So these are some of my observations, which I included in the introduction of my PhD work. How and why I'm going to solve the problem, I had to explain all this through the introduction. So I'm just showing you how these different parts of a PhD work became illustrative. Next, please. So look at this, these 3-4 sentences which I showed earlier in the previous slide. In order to explain traditional residential built forms in Kerala has survived for centuries, I had to do a detailed survey and collect data and documentation of buildings which have survived for several centuries from north to south of Kerala. This is just one example. But in this, just to look at this title and explain this, I had to be very illustrative, trying to document different types of traditional residential built forms from Kasaragod to Kanyakumari stretch of the thin strip of western strip of coastline of Kerala. Next, please. And the next thing which I had to address was what kind of spatial characteristics existed in traditional built forms. Are we able to understand this and incorporate them in modern architecture which was happening in Kerala? Frankly speaking, the answer was no. The kind of spatial characteristics of spaces which were used in traditional living by people, they were absent in the modern built forms. So these are all, there's a lot of study of different types of spaces, how they are created, how they are used in the socio-cultural context of Kerala was studied as part of this introduction. Next, please. But what modernism brought, when I look at all the modern architecture which came up in Kerala's built environment from 1950s onwards, this is what happened. Do they have any relevance to Kerala's traditional architecture? No. It was just replacing, something was imitative, but rest are all replacing with exotic looking forms in a state which has got its own climatic context, which I found as a very strange phenomena. But this was what was happening by way of modern architecture. Next, please. And there was a revival. It's not that there was no revival of traditional built forms and not the visual features, but the functional aspects and spatial aspects of traditional build forms. The revival was, in most cases, it was by way of imitation. Next, please. So, having said this, having spoken about the problem which I try to identify, out of this, I developed the objectives of thesis once again in the form of illustrations. So the idea was to identify concepts as linkages from traditional system. What are the linkages from traditional system which we could have adapted and developed upon to create modern houses? And we missed those linkages. So identification of linkages which could have continued into development of modern built forms became one of the important objectives of the thesis. And then merely identifying the linkages from traditional to modern is not enough. Being a practicing architect, I wanted to prove that it is possible to design modern buildings based on the traditional linkages which do exist, which we fail to identify, but design, not only design, but construct, as an example, a residence which adapts such linkages from traditional systems to using modern materials and construction system to design a building and live in the building or experience the built form and prove the point that we need to understand the linkages which are there existing in traditional built forms. And if you understand those linkages, it is possible to have continuity of traditional systems design into a contemporary context. Next, please. So the scope of research was identified like this. Research is to study relevance of continuity of traditional systems of design. The continuity does not mean simply copy the traditional buildings, but the relevance, study and analyze the relevance of continuity of those linkages of traditional systems of design and how to adapt those linkages in contemporary design practice to construct residences. So I focused, being a practicing architect, as I was doing a lot of residence designs in Kerala, I focus in the aspect of designing and modeling residences based on traditional systems of design and which are better adapted to human, environmental, and cultural realities of this particular state. Next, please. So finally, the methodology had to be created based on this kind of introductory studies, and methodology has to be pinpointed to just few important aspects. So a methodology cannot be a very detailed description of what you are trying to do, but very crisp and crisp summary of whatever you are trying to do in the form of 2 or 3 statements. So the methodology was to identify possible linkages from traditional to modern systems. So out of this, just 3 issues which I was trying to address. First is study has to be done with respect to space, material, and construction systems of buildings. What are the spatial systems in a built form? What kind of material systems are used? And what kind of construction or structural systems are employed so that such spaces could be enclosed. Then identification with respect to adaptation and continuity. How do we adapt what we adapt and what we discard so that we can have continuity with the traditional systems? Finally, to prove the point, just like say in engineering research, you try to prove through either mathematical modeling or actually through experimentation. So I prefer the route of experimenting by designing and constructing a building, which I did not want to call as a modern house or another traditional house, but I prefer to call it as a post-traditional house. You see, traditional houses exist, but what would be today's built form? It would be a post-traditional house, which is created using the contemporary technologies, new materials, new structural systems, but it has all the qualities which we associate with a traditional built form. So these are the 3 points as part of the research methodology chapter. Next, please. So space, material, and construction system. Because why this was identified? Because if you take any architectural built form, whether modern or past, present, or future, there are always 3 important aspects to an architectural built form. It has a space system, it has a material system, materials which are used, and it also has a construction system which involves the structural systems which can be created using the given material and the available technology. So architectures, what can be a very simple definition of an architectural built form? It is space, material, and construction system which govern the design and detailing of just the walls and roof. Because what we create as piece of architecture is nothing but walls and roof. Which are barriers which separate the external environment from the internal environment. So when you place a built form in a particular environment, we are merely creating barriers of walls and roofs, making a composition of walls and roofs in such a manner that it carves out spaces for our use during different times of the day and night, for different functions. But it separates the external environment from the internal environment. But at the same time, the spaces create excellent comfort conditions for living. So in any region, such details make certain place adaptive qualities inherent in the built form. This is what is unique about traditional architecture of a particular region when you compare the traditional architecture of another region. You see, there are certain place adaptive qualities inherent in a built form of a place. You cannot simply pick a traditional built form of, say, Kerala and put it in Uttar Pradesh and expect it to function. It will not function, because the traditional built form which has developed in Kerala is meant for Kerala's climate, Kerala's availability of materials, and the indigenous knowledge system in Kerala. So we have to identify the place adaptive qualities which are inherent in the built form of a particular location. Next, please. So having understood these thought processes, one has to create a illustrative research methodology. So this is the illustrative research methodology which I came across, of course, with the help from my guide and mentor, Professor Banerjee, trying to explain the whole idea of the research methodology that I was developing in the form of a simple illustration like this. So what is tried to express here is the entire gamut of how over several generations or several centuries, architecture gradually changes in a particular region. Assuming that the first assumption is that architecture is always climate driven. I'm not talking about introduction of air conditioning or climate control methods, active systems in a built form. But if you look at, in the absence of active systems for temperature control, etc., in a built form, architecture predominantly has always been climate driven in any part of the world. So a traditionally generated architecture of a particular region works for let us say a space system 1, for material system 1, and using a construction system type 1 in a particular time zone or in a particular context of technology. For lifestyle of people, which I'm calling lifestyle 1, their value systems and their activities. So for each generation, there are certain lifestyles, value systems, and activities with which people live in a particular built form, of traditional built form in a region. But generations keep changing, society keeps changing, because changing society is not, we cannot control, because it's a dynamic phenomenon. Society keeps changing. We are not what our grandparents were. They were not what their grandparents were. And our grandchildren will not be what we are today, because the society itself is a changing dynamic phenomenon. And since this cannot be regulated, the change cannot be controlled, we develop different lifestyle. See, my lifestyle is not what my grandfather's lifestyle was. So we call it the next kind of lifestyle for different value system today, different activities which we conduct in spaces. So they demand space system type 2, material system type 2, construction system type 2. So this is the change in architectural built form over, say, several generations in a particular region. But what we need is a desirable architecture. Even if new technology is developed, it doesn't mean that we convert the entire built form into using active systems into a built form which has got all comfort conditions created using technology. That is not depending upon traditional methods of design. We need to have a desirable architecture, which is a combination of the old systems, and we develop a new space system, material system, and construction system, which is architecture which is desirable in that zone. That is not what happened when modernism came into our country. Modernism was not the desirable architecture which we need to have in our own 7 or 8 different climatic contexts in our country, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Kutch to Assam, if you travel, you can very easily identify 8 different climatic zones. But all these 8 different climatic zones cannot have the same kind of modern architecture. This was my contention while illustrating this research methodology. Next, please. So in order to further talk about each aspect of this illustrative architectural methodology, research methodology, I had to illustrate every part of it. So here is illustration of what is space system in the typical traditional built form, which has survived in Kerala, which is called a Nalukettu as a very important built form of let us say a large family which lives in such built forms for several generations after generations. Such buildings exist. So a detailed analysis of comfort levels in different spaces, which we find in the typical traditional built forms of Kerala. In Kerala, they are called Nalukettu. In Maharashtra, if you go, they may be called Vada. Vada is a built form of traditional lifestyle in Maharashtra, and so on. So these are all illustrative examples or study of analysis of the methodology, space system. Next, please. So within this, when this linkages need to be identified, a lot of study had to be done of texts which are available. Once again, here the problem is when you do traditional studies, you don't get books in English. You get literature published in the local language. So I had to depend a lot on Malayalam books written by what we generally refer to as Vastu Pandits, but people who know traditional systems of design and their analysis of what is built form, what is the concept of centrality, which is called Brahmasthanam in the local language, what is the meaning of human standard in design, which is called Manushya Pramanam in local language, what is the meaning of courtyarded enclosure within a built form having an internal space which is connected to the sky, which is called Nadumuttam in Kerala's context. What is the method of developing a design from a small built form to a bigger built form by way of a very interesting way of creating spaces around a central courtyard, which is called development of growth pattern of spaces in English you can call, but in Sanskrit they are called, or Malayalam they are called shalas. Development of shalas around a courtyarded enclosure. Then traditional elements of detailed elements in a built form. In Kerala, it is called Aji. There is a particular way you design a grill around the enclosure around the building, which ensures very good ventilation into the building. At the same time, gives what is called a unique aesthetic appeal to the building as well as creates comfort condition inside. Then there are other spaces and elements as part of the built form, such as Tattam Mughal, Charupudi, minimal openings called Sutram. These are all discoveries actually when I did my detailed survey of built forms, traditional built forms. And none of this, believe me, are ever taught in modern architectural education. Even in Kerala, this is not part of modern architectural education, though these buildings and these details have existed for several hundred years in our countryside. I am sure if you go to Bengal and rural Bengal, where I have again traveled a lot, I have found so many interesting terminologies which are used by the villagers and these are part of the built form. But we are not aware of it because for us, modern architecture means whatever Corbusier gave us by way of his kind of detailing. Next, please. And further illustrated study of how these built forms were not only designed using certain detailing, but how the built forms evolves from a small shala to a multiple built forms. There is a particular geometry of connecting them together, which is based entirely on the centrality, the central space of courtyard, and the cardinal orientation, which is orienting a built form in different cardinal directions, which is a must in traditional architecture. So identifying all these linkages and wondering how these linkages can be adopted into a modern design. So you will come across several terminologies here. I am not going to detail these terminologies since I'll be sharing this with all of you. Next, please. And the relationship of growth of these built forms with respect to human form. See, the moment Corbusier came and gave the red and blue scale, and Corbusier's 6 foot tall human figure raise hand, we thought that that is the standard. But that is not the standard in our traditional build forms. Corbusier's human figure is not the raised hand man, is not the standard in Indian context. In Indian context, it is called Manushya Pramanam, which is again divided into 3 different typologies called Madhyama, Uttama, and Adhama. In Indian anthropological studies, you will come across 3 different kind of human build forms. Uttama Purusha, Madhyama Purusha, and Adhama Purusha, they are called. And this itself became a very fascinating study. Trying to understand, I realized that there is a possibility of doing a PhD work exclusively on anthropological study of Indians and the relationship of the dimensioning system of Indian humans of different kinds in design development. So how the dimensioning system they used in traditional, they never used metric system, they never used FPS system, foot pound, and you see, in traditional built forms, they used human dimensions, which are related to human body and the dimensional system called Angula, Pada, Parva, Hasta, which we don't teach in our schools of architecture. We have given a bye to all this by adopting modern architectural design systems. Next, please. So this was one very important linkage for adaptation and continuity. Then Nadumuttam or courtyarded enclosures, the importance of creating a central space called Nadumuttam or enclosure around which activities happen in the context of Kerala's climate, because this ensures excellent ventilation into all the build forms which are created around the central courtyard. Next, please. So several possibilities of creating different types of build form if you follow just one principle of orientation and development of growth pattern of spaces around the central. It could be an external courtyard or internal courtyard. So there are so many possibilities which are explained in traditional texts, and trying to find out which possibility works for what kind of site, that itself becomes a very interesting exercise when you get down to design. Next, please. And of course, trying the different kind of detailing techniques. I was talking about the typical inclined grill detailing, which is exclusive to Kerala's traditional architecture, which you will find if you go to different palaces in Kerala. Especially this is from the Padmanabhapuram Palace near Trivandrum, the palace of the king of Travancore, where these are very interesting details which not only assures privacy for the people living in, but they can look outwards, but assures privacy to them at the same time, giving excellent ventilation to all parts of the building because of the detailing of these traditional inclined grills, which are called Ari. Next, please. And other subsidiary spaces, roofs at roof slab level, though the sloping roof is there, they create different spaces for storage and for keeping utensils, but at the same time, such spaces which are created using timber slabs and which helps in controlling temperatures in the spaces below. Next, please. And of course, this kind of detailed study involves the way furnitures were created, built-in furnitures which are created as part of the traditional way of living in different types of houses. From the rich to the poor, all types of households have their own built-in kind of furniture systems, which needed documentation to understand. Next, please. And other important details which keeps permanent ventilation as a permanent aspect of any built form. Maintaining minimal openings in cardinal directions and across the diagonals of cardinal directions in a built form, which ensures that the air inside the building, even if it is kept shut, the doors are shut, it remains fresh all the time. Next slide, please. So these are identification. So far, I have trying to identify interesting elements which could find continuity. But at the same time, if you do a theoretic study of theories of design, there are different ways of creating a kind of a design learn when you design buildings, especially in traditional context in Kerala called Vithi Vinyasa, Pada Vinyasa, which we have totally ignored in design, and creating this kind of grid system based on human dimensions, or developing what is known as a mandala for design, developing a 5x5 mandala, 7x7 mandala, and so on, for creating different type of build forms. So here, in order to develop, design and construct a house, I used a 5x5 mandala like this based on human dimensions and proportions. Next, please. And when you use this method, this is called Pada Vinyasa and Vithi Vinyasa of design system. I'm trying to develop a modern house, but using this kind of method. So what you're seeing here is the illustration of design development of a house for a particular property using traditional dimensioning system. What dimensions here are Angula and Hasta as dimensioning system, but I have also given the metric conversions so that it is clear to you. The relationship of dimension is clear with respect to contemporary context. Next, please. So identifying those linkages which happened earlier, incorporating those elemental details into the build form, and developing the design, different types of linkages. These linkages exist in traditional build form, but how to incorporate them in a contemporary form. Next, please. So that, of course, once we do all this, we go in the modern ways of creating working drawings, details, etc., in order to get the construction done. So these are all the linkages which are identified, incorporated in the design development. Next, please. So you can see how the design grows from ground floor to first floor to the rooftop, etc. Next, please. So what you see here, the first image, this is the house which I designed and built in 2005, while as a laboratory model for my PhD work, where I did a lot of experiments for almost 3 years, from 2005 to 2008. After construction, for 3 years, I did a lot of experiments in this to prove my point that a modern house can be created based on traditional systems of design. The 3 images which you see below are buildings which have existed for 60 to 400-year-old houses. The extreme right at the bottom is a 400-year-old house which exists. So I had done a detailed study of all these traditional build forms and designed and built this house in 2005 and conducted experiments within this house and compare the comfort level values with a traditional build form to see if I could achieve the same kind of comfort which exists in traditional build form. So this is application in design and construction of what I would call a post-traditional house. I wouldn't like to call it a modern house. It is a post-traditional house because the entire design is inspired by studying the traditional build forms in that similar environmental conditions. Next, please. So from past to present, this linkages through imagery is also achieved. You see, this built form when it constructs a new house, but when people say, they say that it looks like a very old house, as if this belongs to this place. Visitors who come to seeing this, many students came to study this house. They say that we don't find any difference in this house. This is a modern house, but it is very similar to what exists as traditional built forms in the context of Kerala's climatic context. Next, please. So once again, this is part of the final presentation of my PhD after having completed the experiments within that built form to prove my point, illustrating the research methodology which I adopted and how space system 2, material system 2, a construction system 2, which is supporting current generation lifestyle. So construct a post-traditional built residential built form, which was my objective through research. From traditional design systems, the studies were done. And this is the illustration of the entire process of the entire research methodology in just one image of achieving a new built form, which I'm sure this built form will last for at least 100 years. But by that time, maybe when the next generation occupies this house form, they may or may not want change in this. If the comfort levels are maintained, which is there today, after 100 years, you don't have to change the build form. That's what is unique about traditional architectural systems of any part, anywhere in the world. you don't really have to change. You may have to keep conserving or do small minor repairs, etc., to the structure, but the structure or built form will continue to give the same kind of comfort levels for which it was originally designed. Next, please. So, so this is, in a nutshell, the way I went around doing the PhD work in a very illustrative manner, and also doing experiential manner also, because as I said earlier, architecture is a domain which needs to be experienced. You cannot simply understand architecture by looking at drawings or even by looking at this image. You cannot understand it. You may appreciate it for whatever its illustrative worth is, but if you want to really know the building which I have designed, right now I'm talking sitting in that building, and I have been living in this for 18 years. You have to be my guest to understand this building. You have to really experience this building. Several of my friends have come here. Those who have only seen images, those who have witnessed my PhD presentation, they have also come here to actually experience. You have to really experience. In fact, I told my guide, you have to come and experience it before you even pass my PhD work, because that is true architecture. You have to create an experiential domain as architecture. Not making wonderful drawings and walkthroughs doesn't become architecture. You may make the best of walkthroughs and videos of what you intend to design. It doesn't become architecture unless you can create the experiential feelings in that. So, of course, what I am trying to express here are just simple formulas which we use for writing. And when you write an introduction, start with an attention-grabbing sentence. Of course, I don't have to tell you all this. Any English teacher will tell you how to write in English. Now, here I must say that I actually wanted to present my PhD in Malayalam. But do you think anybody would have accepted in IIT Kharagpur? They wouldn't have accepted my PhD in Malayalam, because I am designing something for a particular linguistic and cultural context. My argument was that why should I present it in English? You see, why can't I present? Today, I think with NEP and this national education policy, today it may be a reality. If I present the whole thing in Malayalam, it may get acceptance, but it was not acceptable. I had to present everything in English, everything. So you see, when I say Ari or Nadumuttam or I use Malayalam words, it has got its own connection to the Malayali ethos, which cannot be explained in English. So when we do traditional architectural studies, when you do research in traditional systems, it has to be allowed to be presented in the local language. And I had another contention which I had was, why should my thesis be judged by someone who is sitting in US or Europe? Or why should an examiner be someone who has never visited Kerala? How can it be possible? Examiner also should be someone who has understood the Kerala ways of design and construction. Of course, these things don't happen in academic world. Finally, everything goes to somebody who has never experienced the kind of architecture on which a thesis is getting done. So, but I was fortunate enough to get an examiner who was from Israel, who looked at this work, and he made a wonderful statement when he wrote back to me saying that I have never visited Kerala, but you helped me see Kerala through your eyes, which was a wonderful compliment which I got from the examiner who looked at he said, I have understood by looking at your work what your state means to you. I mean, it is so clear in the way illustratively you have sent your work to me. I was very happy when I got that. But at the same time, as an examiner, he had 39 questions to me, which I had to answer to him before he would accept my PhD work. And very, very precise questions. That's what I loved about my examiner, whom I have never met. He was from Israel, a professor from Israel. But the way he asked 39 pinpointed questions about my PhD, I was totally impressed with the examiner also, because he pointed out things which perhaps I could not explain in a very good manner in my research work. So I had to rewrite those parts so that I could explain to him what I was intending to do as part of the research work. Next, please. So writing is all about your command over English language. Even today, it is like that. So if you are not too good in English, what I would suggest is, as Madam also said earlier, start writing from the day one. The moment you decide to do a PhD, you should start writing. Read and write. Reading and writing has to happen every day while you are doing your PhD work, because whatever you write may not be grammatically correct or factually, So in order to get the correct meaning out of your written work, you may have to pass it on to someone who's good at that language, who can understand the nuances of use of language for appropriately explaining what you have in your mind. So it helps. So in introduction, how to write sentences which make meaning. I must have written and rewritten in 8 years several hundred times the same sentence again and again, so that I could assure myself that I am making sense in the way the sentences are created. So this is chapter 1, introduction. Next, please. And conclusion. In conclusion, so I told you the research methodology is what exists from between introduction to conclusion. You see, whatever you do between introduction to conclusion is research methodology. So when you write conclusion, summarize your argument in the conclusion. Don't spend use too many sentences in your conclusion. Make it very crisp. Sum up your argument. Don't simply rewrite what you said in the introduction, but in a different wording. Sum up your argument in your conclusion. Connect the sentences which you use in your conclusion to your research methodology, so that the conclusion is a continuity of the thought processes which happened in the research methodology. Next, please. So here are the conclusions. Of course, it will take a lot of time to talk about all aspects. I have published, as soon as I submitted my PhD work, I have published. It is available online, and it is as a book for all those who are actually working in the field of traditional systems of design. Next, please. So what are the methods, the benefits of illustrative methodology? These are the benefits which I found. See, having a sound research methodology in place provides the following benefits. See, when you make it illustrative, other researchers like it. They get a clue on how to illustrate an idea which you have in your mind. So these are the benefits of having an illustrative methodology. Other researchers who want to replicate the research have enough information to do so. Researchers who receive criticism can refer to methodology and explain their approach. Because the methodology is illustrative in nature, you will not get stuck while you are doing your jury, when you are doing your synopsis presentation. If you have an illustration before you, you can pick up clues to speak in a very logical manner. If you have not just text before you, it's very different to pick up a clue to speak. But if you have illustration before you, illustrations have several clues, which gives you a good, thread of argument about what you have tried to do. Next, please. So this is the PhD work, which is almost fully illustrative. In fact, another thought which I had was that I should do it the Leewardist way, fully cartoon-oriented PhD work. I don't know if they would have accepted that. Who is a Leewardist, the people who just illustrate architecture. So given a chance, I would have either written the whole thesis in Malayalam, or I would have done it in the cartoon format to explain what I am trying to do as a research work, because ultimately what I designed as a building had to be experienced. No amount of illustration or cartoon will also be able to explain the quality of space that I have tried to achieve in the built form. So this is my PhD work, which is available on Pothi store and also on Kindle. It's full of illustrations for those who would like to look at it if you are doing your PhD work in traditional systems of design. Next, please. I think this is the last slide. Yes, this is a link to that. I hope I have made sense. By talking, I can't be very illustrative. I like to talk using images, because that is perhaps, as a teacher of architecture also, I prefer to use a lot of images, and I do a lot of sketching also to explain what I'm trying to out here in this. If I was in front of you, perhaps I could have tried the skill of sketching, etc., to explain something. But I am tied up because of this technology that we are using to be in touch with each other. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry for the delays in the beginning, but I hope I have made sense. Since I have shared this with all of you can take a detailed look at, and if you have any query, please ask me questions after going through all this presentation. Or even if you ask after reading my PhD, I'll be very happy to give you.
Thank you, sir, for all the time that you have given to us, and wonderful session, I should say, and really enriching and wonderful session.
I would like to thank one person here, my dada who is here. JD, where are you?
JD sir will rejoin after some time.
Okay, because we did the PhD together. We were together scholars in architecture department. So we have lot of ideas to share when we were working together at the same time. I was very happy to see that he is here in this institute. Yeah, please give my regards to him. Yeah.
He's there with us for the last 2 years. Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, we have been great friends in Kharagpur.
With us for 10 days.
Wonderful.
And it was really wonderful having you. We are really missing your sketches in Facebook, which I have been following for the last 8-9 years.
Actually, I am little busy trying to publish all my sketches. I'm making a book out of all those sketches. Then I'll start again. Second phase of sketching.
Yes, wonderful. This thing. So it was really wonderful to have you with us, and I really wanted that your experiences to be shared with the new generation researchers. We have a lot of new generation researchers in our institute, and most of them find it research in pure architecture these days are really going down the slope.
Yes.
That is one of the things. Now, officially, Mahima, I think you should open the platform for questions of the participants to sir, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, on behalf of all the participants and organizing committee, I would really like to express our gratitude for sharing this knowledge and expertise with us during this session. Not only was it different from what we hear in general, but you explained everything. You explained your research with the help of illustrations. So that was the plus point. What you said, you were showing it exactly as it is. And the best point about it was that the last thing that you said, how criticism can be dealt with in a logical manner with the help of illustration. So I think will struck a chord with a lot of mid-level PhD scholars who are about to face that criticism hard and fast now. But and your insights and experiences have given us valuable perspective on the topic and inspired us to really explore further in this area. We appreciate the efforts and the time that you have given us to join us today and make this FDP a great success. And thank you for your valuable contribution. I would like to open the platform for all the participants for any questions that they have.
Please raise your hand on the symbol, and we will be able to get you. Please.
Yes, Pravash.
Yes, Pravash.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Sir, myself Pravash Ranjan Rao from FOEP. I'm doing my master's in MURB first year.
Pravash, can you be a little loud?
Louder, please.
Yeah, your voice is slightly inaudible.
Is it audible now, ma'am?
Yes, it's better.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Myself Pravash Ranjan Rao from first year MURB, FOEP only. So basically, I had a doubt, sir. I find most important issue in research methodology is ensuring the validity and reliability of the research findings. So what should be the process or techniques that should be involved during doing the research to validate the same, or rather not doing a wrong data research finding?
See, to ensure validity, one important thing that you should do as a researcher is to find out how many people have done research before you in that same domain. If you get in touch with people, you have to look at in similar domain other experts who have done PhD work. They will help you a lot in clearing your doubts. So you must have your supervisor is one person, but not necessary that your supervisor has done there is research in the same field in which you are doing. So related to the work that you are doing, your worry is that whether it will get validation or not. So if you meet experts who have done similar work, you will get confidence from them. So at least 1 or 2 persons you must try to identify who has done research in the similar field or related field. Now, for example, in my case, I told you I use a term post-traditional. Okay, and it is not a term which I created. I found this in somewhere in Norway or somewhere, one researcher who had used this to talk about how it is possible not to have modern buildings but to have post-traditional building in any. That was his research work. So I thought that was a wonderful. So I communicated and I found this word very, very meaningful, that there need not be something called modern, but it could be post-traditional. So I communicated with the person, got his research work, which was on post-traditional methods. So you have to look at other people who have done work before you in the same domain, so that you can get certain validation about which you have some doubt whether it is acceptable or not acceptable. Other than your guide, you should have at least 2 or 3 other persons with whom you can easily communicate your thoughts. Before even submitting, you could send your work to them to get their validation. It helps. If you are a true researcher, you will do that. You see, identify people who are senior, or they could be even junior to you also, who would have already done PhD in that work. So getting validation from 1 or 2 other persons helps a lot in developing your confidence about the work that you are doing. I hope I have clarified your doubt.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Mahima, you are on mute mode.
So next we have Shreyak with us. Shreyak, can you please proceed with your question?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for this amazing presentation. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So thank you, sir, for the amazing presentation. It was really inspiring. I'm an assistant professor here at AKT at FOAP. So you talked about how you created an experiment by designing a house itself, right? It was a part of your experiment. It was a part of your strategy. My question here is about people who want to do a similar thing, but the domain is slightly larger. For example, someone who's doing research in the urban domain, who wants to conduct an experiment where he or she is looking at a different idea of design, of implementation of thoughts and theories, but they can't really design the experiment as you did. I would like to have some suggestions or advice on people who are looking at doing a similar kind of work, but in the urban domain where creating an experiment is maybe slightly impractical.
I think there is.
I lost the connection. So, Mr. Shreyank, can you just repeat your question?
Yeah, sure, sir. So basically, I was saying that like you were able to really design the experiment that you were trying to research.
Yes, yes.
I'm trying to ask a question in a similar fashion. It's like people doing their research in a similar manner want to do an experiment in the field of architecture, looking at how different theories and thoughts could be implemented and the results could be observed. However, the domain at which they're researching is slightly larger. For example, the urban domain, where conducting or creating an experiment like that might be slightly infeasible. I would like to have an advice or some thoughts about that from you.
You see, if you cannot do an experiment related to it, then it depends on what.
So I'm looking at how the urban form might evolve in the future, considering the information communication technology intervention, the information revolution. I want to see how the transformation might happen, how new interventions might affect people. Experiment could be a very good idea, but trying to design an experiment is becoming slightly tricky. Like you had literally designed a building which
Yes. So yeah, you can design building, but you can design an entire urban environment. Correct. That's what you are trying to say. But technology should be of great help in this. You see, do you know today one of the most important fields developing all over the world is gaming, world of gaming. Game design. And there are so many architects, visualizers who are going into that field because game design is all about a virtual built environment, virtual environment. If you remember the game called Prince of Persia, which became very popular about 20 years ago. I don't know if you have played the game Prince of Persia. So it was all about very interesting built environment. Today we can have softwares which can simulate the environment. You can have softwares which simulate everything. You can simulate rain, you can simulate sunshine, you can. So in many ways, in urban design domain, when you do PhD work, you should be able to create virtual environment and do simulation study on that. That is possible. Because simulation is a big, see, if you look at how space technology is changing and people are thinking of colonizing Mars and Moon, it may not happen in my lifetime or maybe in your lifetime, but we don't know where we will be 100 years from now. We don't know. There are competitions for designing residences in Mars and all going on, NASA and all that. But maybe 200 years from now, people would have colonized Mars or other planets and all that. But how do we reach that stage? We reach it because we can simulate today the environment. The gravity conditions can be simulated in a computer, So simulation is another wonderful domain, but for that, architects have to educate themselves in the world of computer science. I strongly believe that that computer science and computer programming, not just use of software, but computer programming fundamentals, coding, etc., must become part of architectural subjects. I strongly believe in that, though I don't know anything about
Absolutely
coding.
agreed, sir.
But when
Absolutely
I look at the way coding, the architectural programming, writing programs so that you can develop designs, expert systems can be developed. It has to become fundamental first level subjects in architecture. I don't know why we waste 5 years of time making designs and making presentations. It's a big waste. 5 years we waste in only making presentations, but we don't touch science and technology related to those kind of built form by way of simulations, by way of understanding behavior of air or wind inside a built form. We have to turn upside down the entire syllabus. See, and we are still stuck with the syllabus given to us by RIBA, and we are still looking at McKay for the constructional details, which is very sad. We have to change. We have to bring in computer science. Shreya, your problem will be solved only if we have computer science taught, if we have simulation studies taught, use of all the. Then you can design the entire city and analyze the city, whether it will work or not. What built and it's not urban design. Entire city can be analyzed.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
If you can create a virtual city, you can introduce vehicles, vehicle congestion. You can transportation planning and analysis can be done through simulation. It's all possible actually today in today's world.
Yes, true.
For that, computer science knowledge is very, very important. Very, very important.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So thank you for the input, sir. I'll start working on that now.
Please do that. It's a wonderful field actually. Look at gaming environment. Look at gaming environment and look at the softwares. There's something called Unreal Engine, which is a software.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic software. I mean, architects must learn that. Architects must learn to use Unreal. Architects must try to create new avatars for the virtual world. You see? Second Life, Unreal Engine. These are all the places where architects should get into to understand designing virtual world and simulating all the kinds of real world activities in the virtual world.
True. Yeah.
Correct.
I get your point.
Big domain available to us.
Architecture has now become a very big domain and very, very broad domain.
Yes.
It includes design, it includes planning, it includes animation, everything. I mean, like rightly you have said that we actually waste 5 years teaching to students for designing and presenting, whereas we don't teach them coding and all this stuff. Maybe, I mean,
we don't even teach students how to make a costing of the building they have designed. Nobody knows.
Exactly, sir.
What is the point?
What's the point? Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, estimation, costing, and its allied softwares.
Yes, yes, yeah. Why not? You see, right from first year, a design project should be submitted along with this cost. I believe in that. Right from first year, every project submission should have a total cost calculation for that project. For 5 years, if you do it, you will become a good practicing architect. As soon as you get out, you will get projects to work on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rightly said, sir. I think with the coming NEP,
Yes,
we have to do that. That is a very big opportunity for us. The syllabi everywhere around the pan India level, it needs a major revision and major this thing. Like as you said, Mackay, we hardly an architect goes for an ledged batten door, but that is what is taught to him for 2 semesters.
The details, timber details, which I see in Kerala's traditional architecture, they are not there in any textbook.
They are not done anywhere.
Anywhere. I had to learn it all over again from local carpenters, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, Shreya, do we have you with us?
Yes, yes. ma'am.
Shreya Agarwal.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, sir.
Shreya,
Hello,
would you
sir.
like to ask your question?
It's nice.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this. Sir, my question is, like you have mentioned in your synopsis subject, that you have
Can you give
experimented a
us
lot
your
in
brief
your
introduction,
before
Shreya?
making research methodology.
Shreya, can you
Okay,
please give
sir.
your brief introduction to us? We don't know you.
Agrawal, I have done BArch and
Shreya,
sir, I am Shreya.
Shreya, your
I have done my BArch from.
Yeah, now it's fine. Now it's better.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sir, my name is Architect Shreya Agrawal. Can you hear my voice, sir?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. No, your voice breaks.
Focusing on sustainable architecture with philosophy. So, sir, my question is that you have already mentioned in your so in your presentation that before making research methodology, you have done many experiments. So I just want to know about what experiment you have done before making the research methodology.
See, first of all, in doing my kind of this work, practice is very important. I have been a practicing architect. I have not been a teacher who is teaching theory. Even if I'm teaching in college, I have been focusing only on building construction as a main subject. I was quite hardly interested in design as a subject because everybody can design. But what to construct, structural system and building construction materials are extremely important. So you have to keep experimenting. See, architecture, as I said, is an experiential subject. So you should know how it is created. You see, there are many people I have met who are doing Bachelor of Architecture, then MRs, and then they do PhD without even designing a building. Or sometimes they have not even designed a boundary wall. You see, forget building. So it doesn't make sense to do PhD in architecture without having at least designed and constructed a couple of buildings. I mean, this is my personal opinion that if you ever want to enroll for PhD, ensure that you have done at least constructed 10 buildings on your own, designed and constructed. Because otherwise you will not do justification. It will not justify, the PhD will not justify itself from the experiential point of view. You see, so the experiments that I have done are varied in nature. Like I have been practicing since 1984, and you see, while doing PhD, it took about 8 years. In those 8 years, I had done so many buildings which are traditional built forms, conservation related, rebuilding old buildings. So spending time with the carpenters and masons who know about traditional technologies, etc. Because these things were not, I never learned these things in college. So experiments have to happen hands-on, on-site, with help from all the other experts in the field. That's what I mean by experiments. So when I finally designed a building, then I did experiments which are required to understand the comfort levels in that building, the building which I designed. So, but they were all using different tools like temperature measurements 6 times a day, the wind movements in the house, temperature measurements, the humidity levels. So I had to get all kinds of equipments to do this on a regular basis. So there are two kinds of experiments which an architect should do. One is before doing the research, you should do a lot of practice. You should be well versed with different aspects of the construction of a building, different kinds of skills required for constructing a building. And then once you design, you should do experiments related to checking out the experiential values of the building by way of temperature changes, wind movement in the built form, and so on. Though you may try to make a design and do simulation, but the simulation is also artificial in nature. You see, what you experience in the real world is more important than even that simulation. So what I meant by experiment is experiments related to every part of building construction. That is something which you have to learn hands-on by working with people and so on. I hope I'm clear about this to you, Shreya.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your support, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Anyone for any questions? Ritu.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, my question is that as
Yes.
far as every thesis or every research related to historical or traditional precincts, we have found that there are only two moving forces, or the two prime moving forces. First is sustainability, and the second one is traditionality. So I just wanted to know that what was your prime moving force? Was it sustainability or was it traditionality that you wanted to
See, both sustainability is part of traditional system or traditionality. My objective was to see whether I can get the same kind of comfort levels which I feel in a traditional building by designing a modern building. It is trying to get the same kind of comfort levels. And when this building now is almost 18-year-old, I haven't put an air conditioner in my building at all. It's not required. Whereas all the houses which are there in my surrounding, almost all of them have air conditioners because they need it in summer, but I don't need. So I'm convinced that the method which I use to understand traditional systems of ventilation has worked in this modern building.
Right. So because it is very nowadays it is very complicated to explain the gentry that why you should opt for the traditional build forms or the historical build forms. So that's why I asked this question from you.
No, it is not merely
So how to convince, basically how to convince.
See, that of course, that is something which you have to have the capacity to explain to your client.
Yeah.
You know, yes, anybody else?
Thank you very much, sir.
Anybody else who would like to have any interaction with our expert? We are running ahead of time, so need not worry. You can have your time.
See, one thing which I would like to add here is that what I mean, the idea of experiential is multifold in nature. Experiential of a built form. How do you have to even spend time with clients and users As an architect, you are designing a building for people. So how close you are to those people also matters quite a lot, especially if you are talking about sustainability in design, using traditional systems of design. You need to spend a lot of time with your clients, and not only clients, even the workers on the site who create. Do we, you see, there's a big difference between we as modern architects compared to the traditional architects. The traditional architects were hands-on people. They used to create the building. They never made drawings. I don't know if any of these buildings, the architects who constructed these old buildings in Kerala, they ever made drawings. They never made drawings. They directly constructed the buildings. But we modern day architects, we never construct buildings. We only make drawings and hope that the contractor will do justify your design. We visit the site once in a while, but that is not enough. If architectural design has to be an experiential, you should be there on the site full time. You need to work like Mr. Laurie Baker as an architect, but how many are able to do it? So, but when you spend time like that on construction site, you may do very less projects. So I have done very few projects, but I have enjoyed doing each project because I have spent a lot of time on I have spent more time on the construction side than on drawing board or a computer. Design gets done very fast, but the reality of execution is more important than the time spent on design actually. Because you may have to change the design while you construct if you have made a mistake while visualizing the build form. So experiential also means experiencing from foundation to finish how your building is coming up. So how can you spend time on all the projects that you have? If you have 15 projects at hand, it is impossible for the architect to be there. So you depend on others' experiences, your assistant's experience. So everything gets diluted in that process. So if you can spend a lot of time by consulting the very few architects, Nari Gandhi, you must have heard of architect Nari Gandhi or architect Laurie Baker. There are people who take up one project. Once a project is complete, then they take the next project because they have experienced material, they experience the structural system which gets evolved, they experience the wind on the site, they experience the trees on the site. Some of the great masters were like that, like Frank Lloyd Wright. Why each of his building speaks volumes about the knowledge which he had is because he used to spend a lot of time in developing a project with his presence on the project, But that is not the case in contemporary times. So the idea of sustainability will happen only if you spend a lot of time trying to know the building, know the context, know the environment around, and so on.
Any other participant has any question?
No, I think there aren't any.
Yeah.
So you can just wrap up with this thing.
So I would like to again thank you so much for sparing so much time and sharing so much valuable knowledge and expertise and answering the questions which pertained to our PhDs and how to take them forward in a proper manner. It was again a very big valuable contribution from your side, and we thank you once again for all of it. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us for the opening session of our FDP. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. And I would like to request all the participants now. We go for, as per the schedule, we are running ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So we can go for the lunch break right now. And we will be back after the lunch break right at 2:30 here on this platform for our next session with Professor Joydeep Datta.
I would like to request all the participants that you can leave this session or you can just be in the session and rejoin using the same Google Meet at 2:20 probably, so that we don't lag behind in the next session and we start dot at 2:30. And attendance is mandatory, so please take this opportunity, go refresh yourselves and come back, and looking forward to the other sessions that we have in continuity. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you once
so
again,
much,
sir.
sir. Thank you so much
Thank you.
once again, sir. Thank you.